Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And a reminder that we're brought to you today by Donors Trust. Donors Trust is the community foundation for the liberty movement, offering all the benefits of any other donor-advised fund, such as simplified giving, tax benefits, and additional donor privacy. Go to donorstrust.org/ricochet to get your no-commitment free prospectus. Jim, on to our good martini, and it was 4 years ago, although in some ways it seems a little bit longer than that. It's been a long year and a long 4 years. But it was at a Republican presidential debate with a lot of people on stage that Rick Perry infamously said this.
It's three agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
Turns out it was energy. And that's important today because, as the New York Times reports, President-elect Donald J. Trump plans to name the former Texas Governor Rick Perry as his Secretary of Energy. The selection of Mr. Perry to lead the energy agency would offer a rich irony. During the televised debate, when he was seeking the Republican nomination, Mr. Perry intended to list the Department of Energy among agencies he wanted to eliminate, but could not remember its name. Now he will be in charge of running it. And so major priorities in that office, of course, are production of domestic energy, as well as refurbishing the nuclear arsenal. Jim, Rick Perry gets a lot of heat for that gaffe, but I'll tell you what, one of the reasons he was on that stage was because while the Obama economy was on life support, most of the jobs, or at least a big chunk of the jobs being created in this country, were due to the energy sector, and they were in Texas because Rick Perry gets it. And if we can get some access to federal lands in a responsible way, energy could be a huge part of this agenda. It's a good pick, I think.
He is. And I was going to say, as a guy who's spoken to Rick Perry quite a few times, he is smarter than that gaffe. And it always has seemed particularly unfair that for a guy with such an accomplished career, and we can debate the record in Texas and all that stuff, for him to be defined by this 10-second exchange. And so, look, obviously, I think we kind of knew that a Trump administration was going to give us better policies than a Clinton one. It meant that all of the kind of crazy cap and trade or efforts to kind of clamp down on energy production or that kind of stuff was going to be falling by the wayside. I was intrigued to see. I'm also nice to see Perry end up with a job in the Trump cabinet. I think, for considering how at one point Rick Perry had called Donald Trump a cancer on conservatism. Yes. Those of us who'd heard and described Donald Trump as petty and vindictive and unwilling to ever forget a grudge. Clearly, he is willing to forget a grudge. Clearly, he is willing to pick somebody who thinks is the best person for the job and put aside past differences. I'm very curious to see what Perry is going to be able to do with this. The job involves a great deal of running the national laboratories, dealing with nuclear power, constructing nuclear weapons, all kinds of stuff you might not necessarily expect that. People think about when you heard about Obama's energy secretaries. You primarily heard from Muniz from during the Iran deal. And you also heard from Stephen Chu every 5 minutes during the Deepwater Horizon crisis, where we kept being informed that Chu had a Nobel Prize. Obama apparently wanted us to believe at some point Chu was going to put his Nobel Prize into the hole and stop the oil from leaking out of the Deepwater Horizon. So, yeah, this is not the most high-profile or glamorous position in the Trump administration, but it's one that I think, Perry can have a good impact, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. And finally, I don't know about you, Greg, does this make Rick Perry the single most powerful and consequential contestant on Dancing with the Stars ever?
Tom DeLay was on there, so it's a tough call on that one, I guess.
Another Texas energy guy. Yeah, I guess so. But having said that, considering how Rick Perry was on Dancing with the Stars this year, it'll be interesting to see if he comes back. People could argue. Somebody said that he's not just, when you saw the dance that he was doing, particularly the first time, he's not just the Secretary of Energy. He's the Secretary of High Energy.
As I recall, he didn't last too long, but given the age difference between him and most of the contestants, I think he still acquitted himself pretty well. In fact, he ended up playing hurt from what I read. I've never actually watched the show.
I was going to observe that when you've got like professional athletes, and I believe at one point like Lil Kim, the rapper or hip hop star was in there, like half of these people do dancing or physical athleticism as part of their daily job. And let's put a governor out there and see how that shakes out. So I have great sympathy both for him and first season contestant Tucker Carlson.
Excellent. Okay. To the bad martini now, Jim. And this one might be a little bit controversial. We go to both Fox News and Bloomberg here. Let's start with Fox News. Ed Henry speaking with Eric Shawn just this morning about some comments that Mitch McConnell had yesterday when it comes to the Trump tax cuts.
Now, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying yesterday, yes, he does support the president-elect's tax cuts, to be sure. But on the other hand, McConnell is saying the only way he wants to move forward on them in the new year is if there are budget offsets so these massive tax cuts are actually paid for. Watch.
I can only speak for myself, but I think this level of national debt is dangerous and unacceptable. My preference on tax reform is that it be revenue neutral to the government.
Revenue neutral is also what Paul Ryan wants, and that's fine, Jim. We've obviously spent a lot of time harping on Barack Obama for doubling the national debt, actually more than doubling the national debt over 8 years. So some spending restraints are good. The issue is he didn't offer any specifically. He also did a good thing in saying he doesn't want another $1 trillion stimulus, which in some ways is what the infrastructure bill, at least right now, seems to be headed towards. So that's a good thing. But here's a couple other parts that leave you a little bit troubled, especially in the lack of ideas department. The debt limit will need to this is from Bloomberg. The debt limit will need to rise next year to avoid defaulting on government obligations. McConnell said he wasn't sure if that would be paired with any deficit reduction measures next year, as it was in 2011 when Republicans held the debt limit hostage and extracted more than $2 trillion in deficit cuts over a decade from President Obama. So it's one thing to painfully raise the debt ceiling. It's another thing to not put anything in place to help mitigate it down the road. And then when it comes to Obamacare, McConnell, again, according to Bloomberg, offered little specificity on changes to Obamacare, saying the Senate would kick off the new year with an Obamacare resolution, basically to repeal, and then start working on replacement. Jim, Obamacare's been around a long time. The debt's been around a long time. You'd think by now we'd have some concrete ideas.
Yeah. The wonk in me is hearing McConnell and saying, good. I'm glad somebody is pointing out that the deficit and the debt haven't gone away. It's good that the deficit is smaller. It's good to see that the economy has rebounded somewhat. But it's not like the debt is getting any smaller. We add to it each year, and at some point that's going to be a major problem for us. It's going to interest payments will take up a larger and larger chunk of our annual budget. And it only will get worse unless we enact entitlement reform, which President Trump has made very clear he's not the least bit interested in. So what do we want to do? Having said that, you would like to see the Trump administration get kicked off with a fairly significant tax cut. That was kind of the centerpiece of its economic agenda. I think there'd be great frustration if no serious tax cuts came to fruition in the first year of the Trump administration. Greg, the only thought that comes to mind, though, is doesn't Trump know somebody who's on good terms with Senate Majority Leader McConnell? Maybe a labor secretary or so. Labor secretary, transportation secretary. Oh, sorry, Elaine Chao. Yeah. So it's conceivable McConnell will really, really give a hard line and not compromise on any of this stuff with the Trump administration. But I don't know if that means he would be sleeping on the couch. Or how it would shake out. I had just figured, like with the transportation infrastructure bill, the disagreements would be worked out pretty quickly. And I kind of have a feeling I'd be surprised if we saw McConnell and the Trump administration really coming to loggerheads. And I'm saying this half facetiously because of the Chow connection. But again, like I have a hard time seeing Mitch McConnell wanting to be the guy who blocks a major tax cut during the Trump administration. But then again, if anything, this year has taught us anything, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, well, it's true that the last thing we want to do is blow up the deficit even further and end up like the Republicans were prior to losing power in the middle part of last decade. Hopefully lessons have been learned. It's a huge problem given the debt that we have accumulated now, but it can be done. And getting the tax rates simplified and lower, I think, can be done and would be very good in the long term for our bottom line.
I would find it deeply frustrating if we went into, if a year from now we're having the same conversation and there's been no major change enacted in the tax code.
Yeah, the opportunity will have been missed by then because then you're in a midterm election year and everybody's just pointing fingers. But when it comes to being responsible with money and protecting your tax rates, It's the end of the year when almost 1/3 of all charitable giving occurs. Do you have a plan in place to make sure your charitable giving gets done easily and in alignment with your values? Donors Trust is the community foundation for the Liberty Movement, offering all the benefits of any other donor-advised fund you could be participating in, such as simplified giving, tax benefits, plus additional donor privacy. But only Donors Trust shares your commitment to conservative principles.
A donor-advised fund at Donors Trust can start with your fully tax-deductible gift of only $10,000. Donors Trust clients are united in the belief that private philanthropy does a better job of improving the nation than government. So if you believe in using charity to promote liberty, then you owe it to yourself to look at Donors Trust.
Go to donorstrust.org/ricochet to get your no commitment free prospectus. That's donorstrust.org/ricochet. There's no commitment. You'll learn how a donor-advised fund works and how it can simplify your giving, save you on taxes, and protect your giving in new ways. You'll also receive bonus content to help you be more strategic in your giving. Again, visit donorstrust.org/ricochet right now to download a free copy of our helpful guide. There's no commitment. That's donorstrust.org/ricochet. Jim, our crazy martini yesterday, of course, dealt with the growing hysteria over the CIA report suggesting that the Russians interfered with our 2016 elections with the specific intent of helping Donald Trump. They say that most of the evidence at this point is circumstantial, and they haven't revealed any of that yet. Nonetheless, you've got John Podesta calling for an intelligence briefing for the Electoral College. You've got a couple of members of Congress saying that the election needs to be thrown out. A former CIA official saying we need new elections. Paul Krugman saying it's illegitimate, yada, yada, yada. Well, the intelligence community is not at all unanimous on this. This is from Reuters. Quote, the overseers of the U.S. intelligence community have not embraced a CIA assessment that Russian cyber attacks were aimed at helping Republican President-elect Donald Trump win the 2016 election. That's according to 3 American officials talking to Reuters on Monday. While the Office of the Director of National Intelligence does not dispute the CIA's analysis of Russian hacking operations, it has not endorsed their assessment because of a lack of conclusive evidence that Moscow intended to boost Trump over Democratic opponent Hillary Clinton, according to the officials who declined to be named. These anonymous officials, or at least one of them, is quoted as saying, ODNI, that's Director of National Intelligence, is not arguing that the agency is wrong, only that they can't prove intent. Of course, they can't, absent agents in on the decision-making in Moscow. Also, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, whose evidentiary standards require it to make cases that can stand up in court, declined to accept the CIA's analysis, a deductive assessment of the available intelligence for the same reason. So, Jim, the soft coup, the pitchforks, I guess we need to put them away a little bit here since we haven't seen any actual evidence, and 2 major parts of our government aren't ready to accept this.
Do you feel like, Greg, every couple of years we get like the CIA is either completely right or completely wrong, depending on what they're arguing?
Right.
Same people like, these idiots, they couldn't get the Iraq war intelligence, or hey, how come you guys didn't see India about to set off a nuke, or Pakistan about to set off a nuke? God, these guys get blindsided all the time. And then the moment the CIA issues then all of a sudden, by 2007, when they put out the Iran National Intelligence Estimate saying that the Iranian nuclear program had died down, look, even the CIA says it. Stop it, George Bush, you warmonger. And then, of course, it changes again. Then Zero Dark 30, and the CIA is the greatest people in the whole wide world. I look at this and I make an observation. Look, the CIA assessment, the idea that Russia was up to no good in this election cycle, very easy to believe.
Right.
The idea that Russia was behind the hacks of the DNC and the John Podesta's emails, I find that really easy to believe. And if not Russian government itself, then the people who are like one arm's length away. That they wanted to create mischief, sure. That they wanted to mess with the Hillary campaign, sure. The idea that they wanted to do it to elect Trump, apparently it's not that they've got some, captured intercell from Medvedev talking to Putin saying, I will transmit this, that we got to elect Trump or something like that. That it basically is, well, we think they hacked both RNC and DNC, and they only released the Democratic stuff. Could this mean that Russia wanted Trump to be elected? Yeah, it could. It also could be that they just flipped a coin and preferred one side or the other. That they wanted to have one they'd release before the election and one they'd release after the election, and just cause trouble for whoever ended up being the American president. The other kind of weird little angle of this story is that Reince Priebus is insisting to high heaven that the Republican National Committee never got hacked. On the one hand, Reince Priebus is about to be Donald Trump's chief of staff. I'm sure he's probably got a certain incentive to make his time at the committee look as good as humanly possible. But you figure that if it were hacked, he would know about it, right? I mean, could he be lying? I suppose. It's a rather big lie, a rather glaring one that would probably, blow up his credibility in Washington. But, is it possible that they were hacked and Priebus didn't know about it? I suppose that's another possibility there. But I mean, there was a real big jump from Russia's up to no good to Russia's trying to help Trump that did it. And as a couple of people have pointed out, Greg, some of these DNC hacks started in the summer of 2015, which is pretty well before Trump won the primary. So is the idea that Russia collected this stuff? I mean, knowing that Trump was going to win the primary, or they hacked into the DNC or the Republicans and were willing to go after them in order to elect Trump. The idea that this was an elaborate Russian plot to elect their guy is much harder to believe than just the general sense that Russia is up to no good, and our policy ought to reflect that. And I think the attempted base stealing by the Democrats is really muddying the waters here. And it just is kind of unnerving when you see the DNI and the CIA at loggerheads like this.
No, clearly the case. And like you said, a lot of the aftermath here, and this is to be expected, has been mostly political, with some people questioning the legitimacy now and so forth. When I think the big issue here, and it looks to me at least like some on Capitol Hill have got the big picture right here, is that a state or people closely working for a state may very well have committed a successful cyber attack against our country. It certainly wouldn't be the first time when you look at the White House being hacked and the OPM hack from a couple of years ago. It seems like we're getting killed on that front, and we've got to step it up. That's, to me, seems like the big headline here.
Greg, between the OPM hack, Hillary's server, Snowden, and Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, whatever he, she, it is calling itself these days, do we have any secrets left? I mean, do you get the feeling some foreign intelligence are like, all right, comrade, let us hack into the American... Got it. Already learned that. Is there anything new here? Move on to the next server.
So
that's my nefarious Russian spy accent, by the way. You can years of acting school required to do that.
So they already know what's at Area 51. They already know who really killed JFK. Man,
yeah, they didn't release any of this stuff. Man, kind of jerks, don't you think?
And maybe they know the really embarrassing proclivities of Kim Jong-un, like you were suggesting yesterday. So who knows?
Yeah, it's a good point. If you got that, what are you saving it for, right?
That's right.
Not doing any good sitting there in the archives next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Jim, we'll figure it out again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to check out our friends at Donors Trust. Visit donorstrust.org/ricochet right now to download a free copy of their helpful prospectus. No commitment. donorstrust.org/ricochet. Please join us Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.